Over the summer, my wife and I, we packed up our stuff and we moved into a new house. Well, a new house to us. And in this new neighborhood, you have these special trash cans. They come from the city. And if you don't have those trash cans, well, they won't take your trash. They'll literally just leave it right there on the side of the curb. And so here's the problem for us. We didn't have these special trash cans. So we called about getting new ones, and they said, no problem, we'll have those right out to you in about 3 to 4 weeks. My response, no problem. That's a big problem for me. Like, what do you expect me to do with 3 to 4 weeks of garbage? Like, I have a 1-year-old. Her business goes in the trash. So certainly you can understand the predicament that we're in here. So here's what we did. We started storing all the trash in the garage as we waited for these special trash cans to arrive. My garage had become this toxic waste dump that no one wanted to go near. I mean, we have this beautiful new home, but we knew that just a few hundred feet away was a toxic wasteland that if you came close, it would make you pay dearly. You see, that's what toxic things do. It makes you want to avoid them because they're unpleasant. They make you feel uncomfortable, and perhaps they can even be harmful. So this toxic concept, it's really become mainstream in our world today, and it goes far beyond just stinky trash. You've ever heard someone say, hey bro, that's a toxic relationship, or this is a toxic environment. What is it that they're saying to you? Well, really, it's that that's a thing to be avoided. You don't want to go near that. Now, I know that for some, this is how they view God. This is how they view things like the church and Christians and what they believe, that Christianity is perhaps just another thing to add to the growing list of toxic things in our world, and as such, it's a thing to be avoided. Now, why would someone draw that conclusion as they look at Christianity? Well, that's what we're going to look at in this series together. And tonight, we begin by taking a look at one of the essential beliefs of the Christian faith and how some have found it to be a difficult thing to swallow. And here's what it is. It's this. That people are sinful, that you're a sinner, and that I'm a sinner. Everyone is a sinner. Not just that we commit sinful actions, but that we are sinful, that we possess a sin nature. You see, this is essential to the teaching of Christianity. We see this all over the scriptures, that when we look at humanity, we see that people possess a sin nature. In Jeremiah chapter 17 and verse 9, it says this, that the heart is deceitful above all things and desperately sick. Who can understand it? So the heart that Jeremiah is referring to, it's not the type of heart that sits at the center of your chest and pumps blood throughout your body. No, the heart that he's referring to is at the center of who you are. It's where your desires come from. Jeremiah is telling us that there's something radically wrong at the center of who we are. Romans chapter 3 and verse 10 through 12, Paul tells us this, as it is written, none is righteous, no, not one. No one understands, no one seeks for God. All have turned aside together. They have become worthless. No one does good, not even one. This text teaches us that no one is righteous, no one understands, no one seeks for God, no one does good. Later in Ephesians, Paul will say something very similar. In chapter 2, verses 1 through 3, he talks about the human condition as one who was dead in our trespasses and sins, in which you once walked, following the course of this world, following the prince of the power of air, the spirit that is now at work in sons of disobedience, among whom we all once lived in the passions of our flesh, carrying out the desires of the body and the mind, and were by nature children of wrath like the rest of mankind. This is what the Bible teaches us about humanity, that there is something so wrong with us at the center of who we are. And even if you try to say, no, that's not me, that's not talking about me, well, the Bible actually has a response for that as well. 1 John chapter 1, verse 8, it says this, if we say that we have no sin, we deceive ourselves and the truth is not in us. You see, it's verses like these that have caused many to say that Christianity is a toxic faith. They would say, man, it's depressive in nature and that its message is harmful and hurtful. They would say that on the outside, sure, Christianity looks great. You just go to church, hang out with a bunch of friends, but be careful because just around the corner, it's a whole garage filled with smelly, toxic trash in the form of harmful and hurtful beliefs. And so the fear is this, that if I embrace this message that I'm a sinner, won't it cause my anxiety to skyrocket? Won't it cause me to plummet into deeper, deeper depression? Won't this cause me to struggle to find self-confidence and self-value? Like, this is the message that the world screams out to us. It's messages of self-love, self-worth, embracing a self-image that's positive, not one that points to the places that are radically wrong with us, that there's a problem at the very center of who I am. And some would say, if that's the door to Christianity, that I'm the sinner door that people have to walk through in order to find faith in Jesus, well, then I want to find another door then. They push Christianity away like the toxic faith they believe it to be. And while I have much empathy for someone who is in that spot and asking those questions, I would tell them, if you search for another door, you'll come up empty. You'll search and you'll never find anything that satisfies the answers to your question about what's wrong with the world and what's wrong with the center of who we are. But when you walk through the door, I am a sinner, you'll find that it is the most satisfying view and the most hopeful view for you and the world. And you see, that's what I want to show you tonight. I want to show you how that works. And I want to do this by working through an exercise with you. So each of you were given a piece of paper when you walked into the room, and I want you to complete this exercise with me. Smack dab in the middle of your page, I want you to start by drawing the globe. Now, the really artistic people in the room, you're going to love this exercise. The rest of us will struggle through it. So underneath that globe, I want you to write the word why with a question mark behind it. And underneath that word why, I just want you to take 30 seconds to write all the why questions that you have about the world. I'm talking the types of things that really cause you to shake your head at the world in disbelief, like why is there hate or why is there evil? Like these why questions, they're going to represent the darkness of our world, the things that we don't have answers for. And so I was super vague in that space, like evil and darkness. I want you to be specific, the things that come to mind for you and your heart. So take 30 seconds to do that, and then I'll join us in a second. All right, how was that for you? I'm sure for some of y'all, that was super easy. There's tons of things that came to mind. For others, it might have been challenging. Either way, we're going to continue on by going to the next step. So, above the globe, I want you to draw the sun. Now, here's what the sun represents. It represents light. It's the thing that makes the darkness, the why questions you have, it makes them dissipate. It doesn't make the bad things go away, but it's the thing that sheds light on the earth so that you can see clearly. It's the thing that helps you make sense of the world and the answers to all the why questions that you have. You see, the sun represents the way that you see the world. Some people would call that the view of the world or your worldview. Everyone has a worldview. Everyone has ways that they try to answer the why questions that they have. Some use politics, some use education, some use friendships, and some try not to think much of it. So now here's the question for you. When you look at the world and all the brokenness that you see, how do you answer the why questions that you have? What is it that's shining a light on all of these things that take place? And is your sun bright enough to help you see clearly? You see, that's what Christianity is. It's a worldview. And it's a worldview that wasn't just made up by man, but it was given to us by God himself through the scriptures. And when we read the Bible, it teaches us how we should view the world and all that's in it. It's the sun that will help you make sense of everything around you, the good, the bad, and the ugly. So C.S. Lewis is he's the guy that wrote the Chronicles of Narnia. Listen to what he says about Christianity. He says, I believe in Christianity as I believe that the sun has risen, not only because I see it, but because by it I see everything else. Christianity is simply the lens that he uses to view the world. He sees everything through it. So what does this have to do with our conversation about sin? Well, here's how. When you look at all of the brokenness of the world, the why that the Bible gives, that it offers, is that humanity is sinful. That's not how we were created, but that's how things ended up. In Genesis, it says that God looked at man that he had made, and he said, man, it was very good. But if we continue to read the story, you'll see that mankind falls, and as a result, mankind was cursed. Not just one man, but all men. And as a result of the fall, every human being who has ever lived now has something radically wrong at the center of who they are. So when Christians look at all the evil and the brokenness of the world, they have an answer for it. It's because mankind is sinful. And they don't stand there in arrogance as if they're better than everyone else, because they know that they too are a part of the problem, that at the center of who they are, there's a sin nature as well. And so the question that we must ask then is this: how sinful are we? Like, how far does the problem run? Well, looking back at the text we read earlier, Jeremiah said that our heart was full of deceit. Romans says that no one seeks after God. In Ephesians, it says that we're dead in our sin. So it's looking like the problem might be worse than we originally expected. And as we turn our attention to the life of Jesus, we actually see how sinful we actually are. Because when we look at the cross of Christ, we see that it was because of our sin that the Son of God was crucified and killed, that upon him the full and complete wrath of God was poured out. Because that's how serious our sin is. There's really no other way. So how sinful are we? When we look at the cross, we see that we are more sinful than we could ever imagine, because for it, the Son of God had to die. So what does this mean for us? Does embracing this truth that you and I are sinners mean that we should just plummet into greater depression and despair? Does it mean that people, because of our sin nature, that we have no self-worth or intrinsic value? Is that the toxic message that you see in the scriptures? Listen, students, it's been said before by many Christians over the years that when you look at the cross, you see two truths. The first truth is what we've already discussed, that you are more sinful than you could ever imagine, because for it, the Son of God had to die. But there is another truth that you see when you look at the cross of Christ, and it's this: that you are also more valuable than you could ever imagine, because for you, the Son of God came to die. You see, this is why I believe that the Christian worldview is the most satisfying and hopeful view for you and for the entire world. If you have the worksheet that we worked together with close by, I want you to grab it. I want you to draw at the center of the sun the cross. Because central to the Christian worldview is the cross of Christ. We view everything through the cross. And it's the most satisfying view, because when you look at the cross, you see what's wrong with the world, but not just what's wrong with the world, because everyone has answers for that. Everyone can open their eyes and see all the evils, and they can point the finger at who they think is to blame for the wrong that they see, but not too many people have answers for what's wrong in them. And I would argue that unless you look inward and you see the brokenness in you, you'll never be satisfied. But it's also the most hopeful view, because you see just how valuable you actually are. That for you, Jesus came to die. We're just on the brink of despair. Just when we think all hope is lost, you're met with this undeniable picture of just how much God loves you and how much he values you. So how valuable are you? Well, how valuable was the life of the perfect Son of God? Because it was his life that was given for yours. So what do we do with this? Well, you've got a decision to make. Does this truth that you're a sinner make Christianity a toxic faith and therefore something for you to avoid, like I've been avoiding the trash in my garage? Or does this truth that you're a sinner, is it the most satisfying and hopeful message that you've ever heard, because it answers the many questions that you have about what's wrong with you and the world? And because when you look at the cross, it gives you a clear picture of just how valuable you actually are. So if you want value and acceptance, find it in the place that's grounded in the tangible evidence and receive forgiveness and healing. Find it in the place that offers real hope for you and for the world. Find it at the foot of the cross, because it's at the cross that we see that yes, you are more sinful than you could ever imagine, but you're also more loved and valued than you ever dared dream.